fun begins.
How's it going?
Hello.
Well,
Greetings, young Jedi.
hello there.
Hey everyone, Hybrid Toy Reviews here with another episode of Black Series of Yesteryear, my retrospective series where I talk about Black Series waves of yesteryear. I've been a collector of the line since day one, and it's always fun going back and thinking about my thoughts of figures way back when and how they've changed over time. So today we are taking a look at the third Orange Line wave, featuring our first repack and 3 unique sculpts. So let's go ahead and initially talk about the new, and we'll talk about the repack at the very end. So, we have in this wave, in box number 9, the Imperial Stormtrooper. Finally, we get a standard Stormtrooper that's not just a Sand Trooper. It was cool getting something not a Stormtrooper right off rip, but they did start this wave off with the Stormtrooper, and this mold came out in 2013, and it ran pretty strong through 2019, so it had a pretty good 6, almost 7-year run, 6, 7, and it was an okay sculpt for the time. It was definitely better than the Clone Trooper, which we'll talk about in next week's episode. The articulation was definitely better, but it was a little bit clunky for the time. You could get them in most of the important Stormtrooper poses, so it wasn't anything terrible. However, I do feel the 2020 Stormtrooper figure really does blow this one out of the water in every imaginable way. The one thing this has going for it, if it's something that would draw you in the first place, is he features the holster on the belt for his blaster storage, which makes him very much an original trilogy trooper. I kind of like the Disney era Rogue One Mandalorian Stormtrooper armors, because it really feels like an amalgamation of every variant of Stormtrooper armor just kind of pushed together to be like the definitive what they truly look like thing. So this is pretty much an OT trooper through and through, and it was fine for the time, but I do think it's been upgraded well. Something fun that this had going on is, besides the E11 Stormtrooper blaster, he did come with a longer blaster that we've not really seen since. So he comes with 2 guns, which is really fun, and if you army built these like I did, you probably have a number of that blaster in your accessories bin, and it's just a fun gun. It's fun. I like giving it to some of my Disney Plus era troopers, just for a little bit of variety on the shelf. Really have nothing negative to say here. It was good for the time, but the time's moved on. And then Orange Line number 10, Obi-Wan Kenobi from Revenge of the Sith, finally digging back into the prequels. Wave 2 ignored the prequel trilogy. We finally got a little bit of prequel acknowledgement, and Revenge of the Sith Obi-Wan on paper has potential to be a very good action figure. Unfortunately, Hasbro did not have the ability or the forethought to design a really good action figure in 2013. This Obi-Wan Kenobi was atrocious. He peg warmed. He was a terrible peg warmer. After this wave came out, for years, going to Walmart meant you were going to see Han Solo, Greedo, Slave Leia, and Obi-Wan Kenobi on pegs. If you went on a figure hunt, you weren't going to find anything much more exciting than those. Obi-Wan here objectively looks fine from the neck down, but he has a tiny head, and it's a painted face, and it's not a very good painted face at that. The articulation, they tried. The double jointed knees, a product of the time, do give good leg range. However, he has the issues where the shoulders are recessed under the shoulder flaps of the costume there, and it really hindered his shoulder articulation. It was all you could do to get him in a two-handed saber pose with him just holding it in front of him. Not very dynamic in any way. And it just really wasn't the best that it could have been. It really sucked. It was a figure that, of course I picked it up. It was the 10th figure in the line. When you got a new line and you're really digging it, you even pick up some of the bad ones. But definitely aged very, very quickly, very, very poorly, and it really left us wanting a new Obi-Wan Kenobi for the longest time, and unfortunately it took 12 years to get a new one. However, the 12-year wait ultimately gave us a figure that is up to the modern standards of literally this year, 2025, so maybe it was worth waiting for, because it wouldn't be as good as it is if it had come out 4 years ago. It would have been fine, a much better improvement, but I think Black Series is really cooking right now. This Obi-Wan Kenobi comes with his single-bladed lightsaber and no other accessory, so it's a little light. The Black Series had really been trying to give what they could on any of these guys, and I remember this was the initial area where people started the "Where's the Jedi cloak?" complaints, which has never really bothered me because every time that a Jedi lights their lightsaber, before they take it off their belt, they take off the cloak. So I think if you have a Jedi on your shelf wearing the Jedi cloak with their lightsaber lit, you're kind of doing it wrong. Except there's really no way to do wrong with your toys. I'm just being facetious there. But I don't know. If I'm going to have them in a battle pose, I'm not going to have the cloak on them. And if I have an Obi-Wan Kenobi, I'm going to have them in a battle pose. So didn't really hurt my feelings. But this was the beginning of the era of getting away from gloved hands and 2 blasters and 2 belts of Han Solo. We'll get back to that. Figure number 11 in the orange line is Luke Skywalker in his Bespin fatigues. Finally, a second attempt at a character in a different costume. So we initially had our X-Wing pilot Luke, which was a good figure, but they went Empire Strikes Back this go around. Luke Skywalker in his gray Bespin gear is a really cool figure. They gave him a new head sculpt in 2020 for the Empire Strikes Back 40th anniversary, and honestly, I think it held up, in my opinion. This figure is definitely dated. It has things like double jointed knees and thigh swivel, but one thing that I like is that it has the pegged wrists with the vertical hinges on both sides. On a lightsaber character, I view that as essential. I don't care about the horizontal in-out hinge. It's useless on a lightsaber character. Vertical hinge through and through, and both hands got it, which is really, really cool. I really liked this figure a lot. I would argue that this figure is the standout of the wave. We've very recently gotten a new attempt at Bespin Luke Skywalker, and I really have nothing negative to say. It's definitely a modern figure and improves on this in every way. But for the time, this was a very good figure. It also peg-warmed a bit. Not quite as bad as the others, but it was definitely a case of this wave was hitting Walmarts and people were grabbing the Stormtrooper and leaving everything else behind. And yeah, I never actually saw that Orange Line Stormtrooper hanging on pegs. Anyone that I ever got was an online order. And then, back in the day, Black Series came in cases of 4, so if there was 4 characters in the wave, there was only 1 of each in the box. This wave features our first repack, and part of you might be like, really? A repack? In a wave that contains a Stormtrooper? And yeah, they decided to repack Han Solo, who was still sitting on pegs from Wave 2. He was peg-warming pretty hard. He peg-warmed pretty hard for a couple of years there. And it was just kind of a weird choice. Like, if you wanted Han, you could get him. You could get him at a discount, potentially, if you looked at the right places online. And just considering that this wave had a army buildable trooper. You can argue with the Sand Trooper. Most people might only want 1, maybe 2 of that guy. But an all-white Imperial Stormtrooper, there's definitely people that would like to build a squad of those, at least. So you would just think, if you're going to have 4 in the wave, if you're only going to have the budget to sculpt 3 figures, which I'm totally okay with, you know, having only 3 unique sculpts in a wave of 4, double up the army builder, get a little bit more of those out there. It really was an unusual choice, not making that Stormtrooper a double pack in this wave. So not really understanding the logic there, but it was early Black Series. They were getting their feet off the ground, and you know, I get it. Things happen, but anyway, that's for what comes in this wave. I personally think that this wave was pretty solid. That Luke Skywalker and the Stormtrooper were pretty good. You know, for the time, you know, they've aged. They have definitely aged. They are definitely figures from 2013. But I think for 2013, they held their own for a number of years. And I do ultimately still like that Luke Skywalker. The Stormtrooper, I don't have any of that sculpt in my collection anymore. I've replaced them all with the 2020 sculpt, but I didn't mind having that until the 20 sculpt came along, so that's kind of where I am there. That Obi-Wan was bad on day 1, and Han just didn't need to be there. So that's really my thoughts on this wave. You know, it was good. I think Wave 2 potentially had a better spread. You know, just there was better variety in Wave 2. And I don't think you'll ever really touch Wave 1 for being all over the place with some generally good figures for the time. Wave 3 definitely kind of shot itself in the foot with the Han repack and Obi-Wan. Again, just not a very appealing figure. So yeah, what do you think? This was definitely nearing the end of the orange line. You could definitely tell there was about to be a little bit of a shift in the line. And it wasn't a bad thing. It's just how things were. But I like this wave, but I remember seeing it everywhere, so I probably wasn't. I probably was on a shorter list of fans of the wave than enemies of the wave, of despisers of the wave. So that's all I really got to say. I just wanted to yap about this wave a little bit and share some of my thoughts. I think generally it was all right. Were you around back in the day? Do you have any memories about any of these figures? Have you picked them up in the years since they've come out? Fire off in the comments below. Let's talk about it. I like talking about the figures of yesteryear, hence why I started a series called Black Series of Yesteryear. So check out the other 2 episodes. Next week we will finish the orange line and move on to the blue line, which was a time all in itself. So I'm very excited for that. Let's get on to that. So we will catch you next week on Black Series of Yesteryear. Keep an eye on the channel for reviews and topical videos throughout the week, and may the Force be with you. Until next time, have a good one.